This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Lloyd Patterson. Here on Connecting the Community, we are following several major economic trends. Tonight, we're turning the spotlight on Northwest Florida real estate, and these days that includes not only sales, but foreclosures. A little brighter picture is emerging. Market Trends reports March home sales up in all 4 Northwest Florida counties in our viewing area, with Santa Rosa sales up 50%. Now, compared to March 09 foreclosures, that number up just 3% in Escambia County, but there was quite a significant increase in Santa Rosa. Okaloosa and Walton counties way up. Now, here's something that's very interesting. The notices of foreclosure. These are down in all 4 counties March to March. Escambia down 24%, Santa Rosa down 9%, Okaloosa down double that, and Walton down a third. So that is a big difference. And another story we want to cover on this program: is it ethical to walk away from a big mortgage even if you can still make the payments? Here to chew on these topics are Al Muller, the president of Metro Market Trends, a Pensacola-based company that tracks real estate data in Florida and South Alabama. David Powell is an attorney with the Liberis law firm in Pensacola. Real estate is one of his areas of practice, and he is licensed to practice in Florida and Alabama. Duane Clark is a mortgage expert with White Sands Mortgage in Fort Walton Beach. His banking and lending experience go back 25 years. He's a mortgage broker, so his job is to match up borrower and lender. And Mark Dufva is executive director of Catholic Charities, overseeing offices in Pensacola, Fort Walton Beach, and Panama City and Tallahassee. Now, Catholic Charities is deeply involved in anti-poverty programs in helping the down and out, and these days that would include many renters and homeowners. And might add that Mark is here today because of a volcano in Iceland, which has grounded his flight and made it impossible for him to go on a long planned trip to Europe. And we're glad, not for the volcano, but we're glad to have you here with us tonight. And welcome all of you to Connecting this evening. We're going to talk about real estate and some of the issues surrounding that, foreclosure, etc. The numbers that Al Muller, your business is the one that produces those numbers. Was it a surprise to you that you saw March sales looking that good?
It was a little bit of a surprise, a welcome surprise. We've been looking for a tick up in the numbers for quite some time. Probably the last several months we've seen hints and signs here and there that the market was beginning to show some signs of stabilization. But it's interesting and quite significant that in every county, single-family resales were up and up significantly. So that's something we're very pleased to see, and we're hoping that we're going to see the trend continue in April, May, and June, and then it really will be a trend and not just 1 month.
Duane Clark, what do you think about those numbers? You surprised?
Not really. It's been a pent-up demand. The government's they had the tax credit sitting out there waiting to expire end of last year. They moved that until the end of this month, and so I think it's been a pent-up demand, and people are taking advantage not only of the prices, the interest rates, but also the vast supply of the inventory that's out there at this time.
There are a lot of homes, that's for sure.
Tremendous.
David Powell, does that surprise you that home sales are up in this area?
No, sir. It's a good market to buy, and we've got some out-of-town people coming in, some military coming in over there towards the base, which is wonderful for the market.
Okay, and Mark Dufva, of course, Catholic Charities doesn't really care that much about home sales, but they do. There is sort of a sign of economic health in a community and therefore the well-being of people here.
Yeah, we care about people being able to keep a roof over their heads in this current economic crisis. And that's been what we've seen. It's the challenge of not only renters, of course, which have been a victim of the crisis, but also mortgage people who own their homes. And we used to see 20 to 30 calls a day, actually upward close to 30 calls a day. We're seeing that maybe down about 20, so about a third down in terms of the number of calls, people just at their wits' end.
Do you have a sense that that might be a slight decline at all?
Yeah, like I said, about a third. We're seeing about a third reduction. So from 30 a day to about 20 a day, and that's collectively amongst the providers who receive calls from people facing that crisis. And I'm talking about people who are 1 payment to 2 payments behind, all the way to those that are $8,000, $10,000 behind, and are getting the attorney letters, and they're just trying to figure out what to do. So again, we were saying at a height of 30 a day to maybe down to about 20 a day now. So.
Okay, so someone gets that letter in the mail from the lender. It's probably not going to come from the bank that originated, or the lender that originated the loan. Or will it come from them, or will it come from the person who actually holds the mortgage?
Actually, it's going to probably come from the servicing company that services the loan. The individual or the company that funded the loan typically does not hold that mortgage anymore. And so the servicing company will actually engage an attorney.
And they're going to get an attorney. They're not going to represent you, the homeowner. They're going to represent their interests, of course. So what should people do if they get that letter?
If they receive a complaint, a summons and complaint and list pendants, that will not come in the mail. That will come from a certified process server. Somebody will show up and hand it to them, or hand it to somebody who lives in their home. If that does happen, they should certainly consult with an attorney, because the time clock starts ticking. They have 20 days to file an answer. They need to, at the very minimum, file an answer themselves. But they should certainly consult with an attorney to determine their rights, because just because you haven't made a payment doesn't mean that that lender or that plaintiff actually is the one who has the right to foreclose your home. There's a lot of things that they have to do correctly, and a lot of mistakes that they can make.
Is it fair to say, Duane, that most of the time lenders don't want the house back?
In this day and time, most of the lenders do not want the houses back, because it's a detriment to them. They have to pay the taxes, the upkeep. The values of the houses have gone down below what the mortgage balances are in a lot of instances. And so no, they would prefer to keep the individual in the house if at all possible.
So why don't they work with the homeowner right away and say, look, let's make some modifications? What about the federal programs that have tried to do that? Are those having any impact in this area?
They're having some impact, but I don't think the government has been very effective in getting the word out to the individuals. Actually, most companies have not participated in these programs. So that's a difficult situation, a question to answer, probably by you and Catholic Charities, I would think.
Yeah. Well, we're not seeing it. We're not seeing any of these modification programs working with the clients that we're seeing. They just simply are out of options, and it doesn't appear to, again, we're not the consultants. We have to refer them to somebody who knows about these loan modification programs, but we're seeing folks that are just desperate. They're just plain out desperate. They're trying to figure out what to do. Obviously, in many cases, they can't afford an attorney, so we have to send them to certainly their Consumer Credit Counseling Service or CEII, some agencies who are certified housing counseling agencies. But quite honestly, they really need to talk to somebody who has more expertise on these loan modification programs. But we see them, they're already, thousands, and they're looking for some way to stay in their home, so they need emergency assistance. But there's not any, they're very difficult to help. There's not a lot of places to send them.
There are no grants for homeowners to help with that, but there are for renters, right?
There are for renters. The federal government provided enormous, actually through the Homeless Prevention and Rapid Rehousing Initiative under the Economic Recovery Act of 2009, provided a significant pool of funds. But I have to be honest with you, while that was laid out there as being significant, the numbers were so dramatic that amount of pool of funds was gone within days in terms of being eligible. So I'm very cautious not to roll out that and say there's funding available for that, because it just goes so quickly. The level of need is so great.
All right, okay, Duane, go ahead.
We actually try and find the various programs to help the individuals. But as I said earlier, most of the mortgage companies have to be a participant in these various programs, and they're very tedious, time-consuming. And some individuals, they know they can't make a payment or two coming up, but some of these mortgage companies will say, only when you're past due can we help you. So you have to go into default in order to enter some of these programs. That's not good.
So that's an incentive to go into default then.
Correct.
But it's the bank using guilt to try and keep people paying their current mortgage. They make you go into default for 30, 60, 90 days. In the meantime, they send you letters telling you, how irresponsible you are for not paying your mortgage, even though they've told you you needed to go into default in order to work with you. And essentially, they're playing on, they're kind of relying on people's inherent conscience to try and keep them paying their current mortgage balance instead of working this thing out.
When you're saying, what they should be saying is, look, don't make your payments to us. Let's go into, let the law follow its course.
Well, no, I'm not saying they're telling people in order to work with them that they have to go into default. But at the same time, they're telling them, hey, you should be making your payments. They'd rather you continue making your payments. Mm-hmm. They don't,
Say, what kind of person are you to go into default?
Exactly.
But you have to go into default to get the help. That's
it's very convoluted.
Sometimes what they need to do is have their mortgage modified because the interest rate's so high. They've been on an adjustable rate mortgage, an ARM, but the interest rates have been so high, if they would adjust those rates now, they wouldn't go into default.
I thought that all the interest rates now on mortgages were really super low. Are they still high?
There's still
what do you
some
call
out there.
high? What's high mortgage rate today?
Well, the interesting part is over 6% is high. We're doing loans at 5%. There are a lot of people that have been spoiled over the years. 5-6% is a darn good rate. Some will see 4%, but high, you see subprime loans that have been 10, 11%.
Okay.
That's exorbitant.
Okay. Al Muller?
The fundamental problem here that we're all talking around is the fact that the values of some of these homes have just fallen so much. For example, say you had a 10% mortgage and they can rework it and give you a 5% mortgage. If you owe $150,000 and the home's worth $100,000, then whether you're paying 10% or 5%, the issue is the value of the home.
Okay.
And that's why so many of these programs are just not working the way they were planned to work. It's the value of the home that's at the root of all of this.
I'm glad you brought that up, Al, and I want to show that one full screen again if we could. It says, when will you recover your equity? And this was a report that I picked up here recently that says that prices on homes are down about 30% in the last few years. If the prices go up, here it is, prices down about 30%, and with an annual increase of 3%, you're going to get back, you're talking about a $200,000 house, if it went down by a third, and rates go up, your home increases in value 3% a year, it's going to be July 2022 when you are back even. You see what I mean? So under these circumstances, you're right, Al. Why would people say, okay, you'll give me a lower rate on my loan, but I'm still going to be 12 years away from paying what the house is worth?
And for certain people, that may be fine. If it's your home and you love the home and that's where you want to live and you want to stay in it, and the mortgage payment is reasonable for you, then for many folks, 10 years without equity is fine. But for so many, it's just unworkable. And that's the issue we're dealing with, and that's what makes this so difficult.
Okay, now I want to ask you the big question of the night. What do you think about people walking away from home mortgages that they could afford to pay because they simply are too far underwater and it doesn't make economic sense. Are you ethically, do you feel, are people ethically bound to pay a mortgage that they can afford to pay, even if it's for a mortgage that's twice what the house is worth? Mark Dufva, what do you think?
Well, I mean, obviously you're starting with the premise that they can afford to pay it.
Okay,
And
yeah, let's just say that they're making the payments now.
They can make the payments now. Obviously, that for most people is going to be an anguishing decision that's going to have to reach, because, you know, the most important purchases one makes, decisions they make in their life, you know, who am I going to spend the rest of my life with, you know, do I have children, and buying a home. I mean, that's a huge initiative, to simply walk away from it. And it is a contract. I mean, we all own homes. I mean, I sign a contract. I'm expected to fulfill my obligations under that contract. At the same time, though, people are seeing what's happened in the last 2 years with the financial industry, and the mistakes that are made on that side. So I don't want to put 100. I mean, I'm not putting 100% blame on the consumer. I mean, I'm looking at the financial industries, and quite honestly, there's been a little mismanagement there, almost to the point of, look at the ethical problems going on in that industry. So even with the way they've responded to it. So I'm not saying that that's a window to walk away, but at the same time, it's not just the consumer that's 100% responsible for this.
You're saying that the environment that this is going on in, that it sort of raises new questions about the ethics of your contract?
Right. I mean, all the coaching you got into it when you engage people, the whole fact that they were giving loan to value with zero money down. I mean, there was the incentive. So the industry was enticing you to go into these things. Industry was enticing you to buy homes that they knew full well were probably you over your head in, but they says, we can do it anyway for you. So they were leading you into that. So do they take some responsibility for that?
Okay, that's what I want to talk about then. And this is Connecting the Community. Lloyd Patterson here. Tonight we're talking about the real estate in Northwest Florida, and we've gone over how sales are up in March, that foreclosures up a bit, but that notices of foreclosure in all 4 counties are down from March to March. And so that's a good thing. But how about this? You have a house, you owe way more on it than the house is worth. You can make the payment, but you decide to walk away because it doesn't make economic sense. The question is that something that you should do? What do you think, Al Muller?
I feel that there are certainly instances where, in my opinion, it would be ethical for certain people in certain types of loans under certain circumstances to look at it and say, this is the right thing for me to do, the right thing for my family. That's another way to look at it. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure there's, and this is already an issue in real estate. They're referred to as strategic defaults. There are people of significant wealth, income, who consult with an attorney, consult with their CPA, and decide that you know, this is something I need to do. But at all levels, to me, it's a matter of the individual situation, where sure, I can see instances.
You're not willing to blanket condemn the practice, in other words.
Oh no, because I'm sure there were people, and you can always go back and say, you signed the mortgage, you should have read it and understood what you were doing. Ultimately, it's your fault. I mean, that's true to a certain extent, but I'm sure there were many, many people, non-sophisticated, who basically were told, you know, if you buy this house, it's going to go up in value, and this is a good mortgage. You know, maybe you're stretching right now, but long term you're doing the right thing. And turns out they got bad advice, you know. And I can see situations where, in my opinion, it would be the right thing to do. In other cases, not.
Duane Clark, you deal with mortgages by the thousands, I'm sure, in your career in the industry. How do you feel about people walking away, making strategic decisions to quit paying the mortgage?
Well, as you said, my background as a banker says it's not ethical, but there are so many outside forces and factors that have affected homeowners and individuals over the years, way outside the local control. The houses have dropped in value. Their jobs have gone away. They have families growing up, going to college, trying to help the children out. It's a business decision, I think, so it becomes an individual decision. Is it right? It's a personal choice. At times, I say yes. Other times, no.
Okay. How about our attorney here? When we get into ethical questions, I suppose you're going to be somewhat flexible in this area. What do you think? Would you counsel a person to keep making his mortgage payment even if it didn't make business sense for him?
That is a decision that they would have to make. To straight up answer your question as to my feelings regarding your hypothetical where you could absolutely afford to continue paying your mortgage, my gut tells me, for me, I would continue making those payments. But when you say can afford to, that could take on a whole lot of different meanings. You know, what if you can afford making the payments for the next 5 years, but it means you have to drain down your entire retirement account, and then you wind up going bust, 5 years down the road. There's a lot of factors going into that, and quite frankly, if you can afford to make your payments, you can afford to refinance.
Okay.
You know.
All right.
I would think.
I would probably differ with that because there are a lot of people that can make their payments, but they can't afford to refinance. Every loan is documented nowadays as far as income. You know, a few years back you could do a stated income. They called that the liar's loan, and that's what got us in a lot of these problems. But you have to document your income nowadays, even to modify. And there lies some of the problems. If the government would come out and allow the people that are making their payments in a timely fashion to modify at a lower rate without going through all this qualifying process once again, that would alleviate a bunch of loans. That's something that would be a tremendous help in this real estate debacle.
You can think back, most of you can think back 20 years maybe, and could you ever picture yourself counseling somebody to quit making their mortgage payments?
No.
You couldn't, could you? You know, it was ingrained in us. You pay your bills. You take on an obligation, you make your payment, you pay your mortgage. But today people just don't feel that way.
The other thing different is that for so many decades we all assumed that the value of real estate would never go down. I mean, that's another issue that's underlying this whole problem, is the mortgages were made on both lender and borrower assumed that the value of that house would remain stable or go up even some modest amount. Once that changed, everything changed.
Do you think the country made a political mistake by pushing many people into home ownership who were better off as renters?
Absolutely.
Oh, yes. There's no question about that. I mean, that's really kind of started the conversation was, again, who takes the full responsibility of that? There are many folks who were counseled by whether they be lenders or others or friends and family, people right out of college going in and buying houses they had, but no business. Because you remember in the old days, when I started, we had to save money first. We had to come up, you had to have $5,000, $10,000, you had to work, you rented, you saved, you had the money, and then all of a sudden now I can afford to buy my home. It was a rite of passage. But you were well into your career, professionally, whatever it is you're doing, you had the resources. A few years ago, right before this bust, anybody could get into a house, and everything was driving the, get your houses here.
And many people who should have stayed renters or stayed out of the obligation of homeownership, do you think that's had been a big problem, Duane?
Oh, absolutely. There's rent is there for a segment of the market. The government made a conscious decision that everybody should own a home, And unfortunately, not everybody needs to own a home. They don't know how to manage it, manage their finances. And that's evident in today's environment. But that was a government decision.
In fact, in many countries, home ownership isn't seen with the same near religious zeal as it's seen in the United States, is it? I mean, a lot of countries renting is very normal thing to do. People rent for 20, 30 years. Of course, you guys being in the business, you probably wouldn't, you know, that's not something you want to hear about, but I mean, renting is a viable way to go for a lot of people.
From a business standpoint, it makes a lot of sense, really, and that's why, you know, this came about. And I share your view. I can remember in the last several years watching people, young people, come right out of college and think, I need to buy a home. You know,
and not just a little starter cheapo home.
Well, I wasn't going to go there, but true. And I remember, you know, being older, I remember thinking, you know, why would anybody right out of school or even newly married, as Mark was saying, pretty typical to get married and, you know, after 3 to 5 years save, you know, and buy a home. But again, it was quite typical. You felt like if we get married, we need to buy a home immediately. And the sad thing is you could. And because they could,
they did.
A lot of people did it and made a big mistake.
Mark?
Well, Lloyd, one thing that was really important here was the statement about we have so many people who simply don't know how to manage their finances. And that's what I see in my business, working with not only just poor, the folks who are in poverty, but across the income spectrum and across the age and generational spectrum. We have simply people who simply don't know how to manage their finances. And again, that's part of maybe culture has led to society and the debt issues that have happened over the last 20 or 30 years. But this is where we really have failed, is teaching our young people, especially my children. I spend enormous amounts of time trying to, work with them about how to manage finances. We've got to do a better job at that. And until we do and teach the culture of managing finances, we're going to continue to be in this cycle.
The live within your means.
That's right.
Sermon that people used to hear all the time. Well, we do want to show some resources that you can contact. Consumer Credit Counseling, which Mark has mentioned, is an important resource. David Powell is at liberislaw.com. Al Muller's business, mmtinfo.com. Catholic Charities, northwestflorida.org, and whitesandsmortgage.com for more information about the guests, about some of the things that we've talked about here this evening. This has really been a very enlightening conversation, and we'll have to do this again soon and see if things have turned around. Thank you very much for watching tonight. Lloyd Patterson here for WSRE. Good evening. Thanks for watching.